Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Fast Casual, Landon's official podcast, brought to you today from Cincinnati, Ohio, and from New York City. My name is Alex Mann, and I'm your host again, and it's great to be back into the new year. As I like to say, every restaurant has a story, and so without further delay, let's get this show on the road. I'm delighted to say I'll be chatting with Craig Dunaway, the Chief Operating Officer of Penn Station, East Coast Subs. Craig, say hi.
Alex, great to be here. Thank you. Hello.
So Craig, I want you to give us a bit of an introduction because you have such a well-rounded background and, you've been 24 years at Penn Station now. So you've been in various leadership positions and you've kind of seen it all. So I'd love to get a bit of your background and get a bit of how you got to where you are today.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. I will tell you that my career has ended up where I never thought I would start out. And it really started probably back in college with a gentleman and I who used to study together, of all things. And we were both fascinated with real estate. And we talked about, we had no money, all we had were dreams. And we talked about when we graduated from college that we would invest in a piece of real estate together. We graduated, my background, we were both accounting majors. I went off to work in an accounting firm. Was with that firm for 15 years and was a partner at the firm. But a couple of years later, after we went our separate ways, my friend came back and was our controller, of all things.
Yeah.
And we rekindled that conversation about buying real estate. And this is a long time ago. I'm dating myself, but it's around 1984. And then a friend of ours approached us about he wanted to become a Papa John's franchisee. We were in Louisville, Kentucky. Papa John's was based out of Louisville. And we put some projections together for him. And he was looking at the Indianapolis market. There were only about 30 or 35 Papa John's at the time. It wasn't the 5,000 plus unit chain that it is today. And we put the projections together. We liked what we saw. And we both looked at each other and said, you know what, instead of buying real estate, let's meet with Papa John's and become Papa John's franchisees. So we met with Papa John's and really liked what they had to say. They were a young company. They had a good product. And, we decided to do that. The market that was available, we wanted a big market. Don't ask me why. We wanted to be big. We had no
ambitious
money. Yeah, we were ambitious. That's the best thing. And Cincinnati was an available market to us. And I'd only been to Cincinnati a couple of times coming to Reds games. And we explored the market, had a lot of meetings with Papa John's and decided to do that. And over the course of about 10 or 11 years, we opened 11 Papa John's restaurants, made money in spite of ourselves, I will say. And I remember the first one we did, we met with the banker and the banker loaned us the money to build it, loaned us 100% of the money. And afterwards, he pulled me aside and said, you know what, I don't know if this is going to work, but I know you'll pay me back if it doesn't. So it wasn't it was not a great vote of confidence for our business model. I think it was more of a great vote of confidence for me. But we did really, really well with it. And I stayed in public accounting. I became a partner at the firm. I was one of the firm's youngest partners. And Alex, you can imagine how I see the world being a CPA. Everything's binary to me. Everything's a penny's business. So, it's black, white, yes, no. But how I got to Penn Station was, it was really serendipity for us. It was about 1997. I was spending every weekend in Cincinnati, Ohio with our 11 Papa John's and, full-time public accounting. So away from home and the family a lot. And three things really happened. We stumbled upon Penn Station one day, just happened to go into a restaurant, liked the food a lot, had never heard of it. Penn Station started in 1985 out of Cincinnati. And I remember thinking the food was phenomenal. And so that led us to meet with the founder and explore the possibility of becoming, Penn Station franchisees. The second thing that happened was my partner said, I'm tired of traveling back and forth to Cincinnati throughout the week. And candidly, I wasn't smart enough to say, well, then why don't you just move?
Yeah.
So, Charlie said, I'm tired of traveling. And then the third thing that happened was the second largest franchisee of Papa John's in Cincinnati at the time called us and asked if we'd be interested in selling. And I said, Mike, not really. And then he made us an offer and I said, we may have interest. So, those
Make
three
you an
things,
offer you can't refuse. Isn't that the phrase?
yeah, I mean, it was really a culmination of, I look back in hindsight, and those three things occurred over a 30 to 45-day period.
Wow.
And it just seemed like the right thing to do. So we ultimately, in around 97 or 98, we sold our Papa John's, and we invested that money to become Penn Station franchisees in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And, Charlie and I, we were coming into our own, as businessmen. We weren't 22 anymore. We were in our early 30s. And so, we started seeing the world of business through a little bit of a different prism. And I ultimately bought him out in 1999.
Yeah.
At the same time, and this answers your original question, at the same time, our founder, Jeff Osterfeld, was building a golf course. And Jeff asked me if I would move to Cincinnati and run Penn Station, become the president. And I told Jeff I was flattered but not interested. I love public accounting. I love the clients I worked with. But, honestly, Alex, I didn't want to be 50 or 60 years old and billing my time out on an hourly basis. That's really, really hard work. You told me offline your dad's an attorney, and I'm sure he works really, really hard at what he does. So I was the young partner at the firm. I was the go-to guy. I mean, I was in my early 30s, and the other partners were, 40s and 50s. And so anytime a younger person wanted career advice, they came to me. And, it's tough when someone comes to you and says, hey, do you think I'll be partner one day? And you don't want to lie to them, and you say no. So I was giving advice to people unsolicited. I mean, they were asking me. I wouldn't go up and give people advice without being solicited for it. But I felt like if I didn't pursue the opportunity Jeff gave me, then everything I had done was hypocritical. So I'm telling people, take this risk, take this chance. You can't steal second base if you don't get a lead off first, and then I don't take it. So I decided, I saw Penn Station was very similar to Papa John's, a focus on the quality of the product, a focus on the franchisees. Both brands are selling return on investment. And, I felt like it was the right thing for me to do. So uprooted my family and moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, and, was president through 2019. And then our VP of operations moved up to the president role. And then I moved up to the chief operating officer, right then as well. So I'll add that I stayed a franchisee of Penn Station through 2014. Yeah. And, when I sold my restaurants, I had 15 of them. And I sold not because I didn't love franchising as the franchisee, but I wanted to focus, 100% of my attention on the brand. Yeah. Because I felt like we had so much upside. And I think what was good about that over the years is that I've been on both sides as a franchisee and a franchisor. So, if a case of potatoes goes up $2 a case, I intimately understand what it does to franchisor-franchisee relationship. So
it's actually quite interesting you say that, because, one of the things I've definitely noticed, running this podcast now and speaking to, peers of yourself, like leaders in the space, that in sort of the most successful of operations, it seems to me that the leaders within those operations all have an innate hospitality background in and of itself, either owning franchises or having run restaurants in the past and have kind of, evolved their career to the point that they're now running the kind of operation. And I'm curious, when you talk about that intimate understanding, is that a trait that you look for in leaders when you hire into the business today, for example?
What we look for when we're hiring people, we're a type A personality organization. Everybody's smart, competitive. Yeah. Anything that can be measured, we measure. And I don't want to say we pit franchisees against each other. That would be a negative connotation. We always want franchisees to know how they're faring against their peers. Yeah. And because this is a pennies business, and I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more, but the type of person we're looking for has drive, motivation, but has a lot of emotional intelligence too. Yeah. And you have to be, when you're in a leadership role, or you're the franchisor, or you're overseeing more than one person other than yourself, you have to have emotional intelligence and be empathetic. and understand what motivates them. And I've always been fascinated really with contract negotiation and what creates win-win. And so that's the way I've always tried to approach my leadership style.
Yeah.
I've never been a despot when I'm leading people. I always want collaboration. And I think people know the answers most often. You're just trying to polish it and give them confidence and pull out the answers they know. And if their answers are wrong, or you think maybe they can go in a different direction, I think you can squelch somebody's enthusiasm, or you can make them better by not squelching it. So.
It's interesting you say that. I used to work in consulting back in the day. Forgive me, although it was technically design consulting, which was very fancy at the time, and we used to do like lots of leadership, organization, intelligence sort of training for businesses, for like Fortune 100 businesses. And I remember we used to have phrases called brown housing and green housing, and especially for so it was like innovation sort of consulting. And I remember we would run these sessions, and we used to have like pictures on the wall of like a greenhouse, and we'd ask people, do you know what this is, before we'd start the session? And people are like, I don't know what that is that a greenhouse? And we're like, yes, that's a greenhouse. Why is it important for you to remember when we start this session that we really want you to take away the word greenhouse? And they're like, why? Because we want like those little ideas that you have to like germinate and not allow them to get destroyed by the outside elements. And then we had a phrase called brown housing, which was like obviously the opposite, which is effectively crapping on the ideas effectively and not letting them sort of germinate. And I think about that a lot. And it's interesting you say that, because it's so true. I think, for lots of like leadership, it's like, you're basically trying to put your arm around somebody that if you're hiring somebody, they're capable in the first place. Like the point of hiring somebody is you're hiring somebody capable of taking a number of boxes. But you want them to be able to feel the comfort, the psychological safety almost of being able to speak their mind, knowing that you're paying them for that insight in the first place, and effectively greenhouse them. So it's interesting you say that, and you just reminded me of greenhousing, so to speak.
Well, and I think when you're hiring people, the personality traits of an accountant are going to be different than the personality traits of a marketing person, right, or a salesman.
I worked in accounting, by the way, just so you know. I did a summer internship, and let me tell you, that's why I'm not an accountant.
That's why you're not an accountant. So, we look for that, again, that A-type driven personality, and we look for that with franchisees as well. I mean, we want someone who's passionate and compassionate and who wants to grow, who wants to build something that's a much, much greater good. So I learned a lot early on in my career from Stephen Covey, seek first to understand, and then be understood. And I say that a lot still. When we bring a franchise candidate in, it's so interesting when you bring a candidate in and they've come from other brands or their backgrounds. And I don't want to say every time, but maybe more often than not, they want to try to change us before they really understand why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And, we give a kind of a kind speech of, we've been doing this now for 38 years. It's worked. We got 325 locations in 15 states. So I'm not telling you we can't improve, but I'm telling you, you would do yourself a disservice if you didn't intimately understand everything that we do.
Yeah.
You do that for 6 months. And then when you got ideas and suggestions, you can take them to our franchisee advisory council. You can call us. Everybody has an open door policy. We want to do better. When no one wakes up in the morning and says, how can I fall backwards? And I think that's the great thing about competition. Everybody continues to get better every day. And if you don't improve, then you're going to fall back and eventually fail.
It's interesting because finding the people who have that sort of learner mindset, that are willing to kind of come in, learn everything about an organization, and then bring their best to improve that sort of situation. It's harder to find than you think it would be. You know what I mean? And I hear you say it there, people can be kind of set in their ways and this is how I've done it, and this is how I want to do it, versus this is how the system does it. And, it's there's a place within that system for you to make it better. And I'm always curious, and it's not just this is almost agnostic to any sort of role. You see, I see that when I hire people here, you know what I mean? It's people want to come in and change all of the marketing that we're doing. And I'm it's actually really working. Do you know what I mean? I'm here for you to test whatever you want. You know what I mean? But it's like the fundamentals of what we're doing until you can prove to me that this is like a much better way of doing it. We will keep our sort of always on, you know what I mean? Like our process for like our own success, which we've seen to date. Not that I want to big myself up here, but you know what I mean?
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't think people change. I mean, you might adjust a little bit, but I think by and large, people are what they are.
Yeah.
And one thing that we learned early on, and I did this, I met a gentleman, I used to run marathons, and I met a gentleman running, and his company did personality profiles. And I was extremely skeptical. So, I mean, don't think I'm going into this selling this thing.
No, it's okay. I mean, corporate America loves them. So,
right.
Like, I mean,
well, and so, we did my personality, and he espoused it back to me, and he was very close to how I was and who I am and how I think, et cetera. And so I went to Jeff, our founder, and said, Jeff, I'd like for you to do this. And he was skeptical. I mean, he just, oh, come on. So he does it. He has a meeting with the doctor who interpreted it. I'll never forget this. Jeff walks out of his office, and Jeff's a real dark complected guy, and his face is white. And I said, what's wrong? He said, oh my gosh, he knows me better than my wife. It's unbelievable. So my point being is we started giving employees, prospective employees, and franchise candidates personality profiles, because I think kind of like this, just you and I talking right now. I mean, there's no such thing as a bad resume. Everybody puts their best foot forward in a when you're sitting down for a job interview. But I think when you start answering questions where they're not binary, but you have to make choices, and then you start looking at trends, it's helped us out a lot. And we've actually, we've actually used that a lot, and we use it also even in staff reviews, because if someone is very sensitive, you have to approach it a little bit differently. And then if they're just laissez-faire about everything. So it's not the end all. It's a tool. Yeah. It's a tool for us. And totally. We do use those, because I've said a couple of times to you today, this is a pennies business. And the best way to not make a lot of money in the restaurant industry is to not focus on the pennies. Yeah. You have to be detail oriented, and you have to care about the hundreds of a percentage decimal points in line items on the P&L, because if you don't, you just will never maximize the amount of money that you can make. So, one of our signature products is a fresh cut fry, and with a 9-ounce fresh cut fry, you should give a couple packs of ketchup on a to-go order. Yeah. Well, if you give 10 packs of ketchup instead of 2, you're never going to make that up. Is 8 packs of ketchup a lot of money? I don't know. It's probably about 16 cents. Is that a big deal? It is if you sell 200 small fries a day.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's what we look for, and those are the traits that we look for in franchisees, to make sure that they intimately not only understand that, but it's important to them. I can't make you look at the details if you're not a detail-oriented person. Yeah. But we're selling return on investment, and we have 324 locations. We have 70 franchisees. And ultimately, if we bring in a new franchise candidate, we're selling their profitability.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Because if you came in a month from now and wanted to be franchisees, you're going to want to know how everybody else is doing. And so if they're not detail-oriented, they're not making as much money as they can make. And it makes it more difficult for us to sell restaurants.
No, absolutely. And what's interesting? I mean, I hear there was, I've heard that, and I had a restaurant consultant on the podcast about a couple of months ago, and who was, not a formal accountant per se, I would say, if I still remember his background, but was the sort of pennies understanding kind of operator. And I think it's interesting because it's a point of view that I don't necessarily hear espoused, in the sense that I think it's kind of like everyone is yeah, duh, obviously you're going to focus on finance, you know what I mean? But I guess there's only so many very successful franchises. I mean, how many, I actually don't know the number, but I would be I would hazard a guess there's probably in the 99 percentile that there's people businesses that have over 300 locations. Do you know what I mean? There's not that many that exist given all the other franchises. And I'm wondering for you, do you see more of that as a culture problem in organizations that can't get to 300, or is that more of a finance problem that they can't get to 300?
Well, I think when you're starting out as a brand, you're really just you're trying to figure out what you're selling, right? You're putting things on the menu and you're taking them off and what resonates and what doesn't resonate. And, to me, when you're starting a concept, and I did not start Papa John's and I did not start Penn Station, but ultimately you've got to get to scale. And the only way that you're going to get to scale is by making money. And, I was on a panel one time, and I had a gentleman come up to me who had 2 restaurants, and he asked me, I'd like to get to 10. How do I do it? And I asked him if his 2 were profitable, and he said no. And he had never approached it from the financial standpoint. He had approached it and I don't remember what he sold, but I've got a great tasting burrito.
Yeah.
But if you can't make money on your great tasting burrito, I mean, you sell more of them, you're going to lose more money.
Yeah.
And so I think what you have to do is, to get to scale, you have to micromanage those pennies and make it profitable so that someone wants to buy it.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of there's a lot of concepts that have gotten to 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 restaurants, and they've just never made any money at it.
Yeah.
And I think that is imperative. I mean, as a franchise candidate, I believe you get into a brand because you believe in management, you believe in the product, and you want to make money.
Yeah.
And if all those boxes aren't checked, then why do it? I see a lot of people getting concepts that are losing money, and it's kind of always baffled me. It's almost like you're hoping it eventually becomes profitable.
Yeah.
And as a candidate, I would not do that. I wouldn't want to be involved in a brand that's a proven concept. You may never hit the grand slam by doing that, but there's scale.
Yeah.
And there's success there.
And I guess, when it comes to understanding, say, the economics of, say, that burrito, okay, as an example, like in, say, today, where food prices are like kind of through the roof, or, well, extremely volatile, obviously the last like 2 years, like how much more of a focus does that put on the economics of your business, in the sense that you're looking at it to the, like you said, the hundredth like degree, or to the nth degree of every penny? Like, does that concern you? Does that like worry you? Does that like keep you up at night, the volatility in food prices? Like, because like you said, it's a pennies business. So like it matters.
18 months ago, it kept me up at night. I think prices have stabilized a little bit.
Yeah.
You asked me about culture, and I'll tell you a story that when COVID hit, it impacted the world, right? And I remember that we pulled the team together in our vestibule, which is fairly large, probably a 50-foot circle, and having everybody spaced apart. I mean, we didn't know what was going on. And we gave the team a speech where we're trying to serve. We have all of our restaurants are franchised except one. And we've got managers and employees on the front line serving guests every day during COVID.
Yeah.
And we said that we are going to be there for our franchisees, and we are not going to fail. And we knew what not failure meant, but we didn't know how we were going to get there. And so Lance Vaught, who's now our president, he and I spent 6 months every day working side by side in the conference room together. And what we told franchisees early on was, you take care of everything within the 4 walls of your restaurant, and we'll take care of everything outside the 4 walls. We'll take care of marketing. We will make sure that you have product in your restaurants every day. You just focus on your team and your people. And back in 2012, we had a credit card breach at Penn Station. And early on, best call I ever made was to our attorneys. And I told them, I said, I am going to explain to our franchisees what is going on with the credit card breach. And our franchisees were nervous. They were scared. How much is this going to cost me? And our attorneys gave me a lot of pushback and said, no, that's a legal risk. And I said, I don't care. I am going to tell our franchisees, because if we don't lay out the facts to them, they are going to, that's how rumors get started. They're going to try to connect dots that maybe shouldn't connect.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be candid with them. I'm going to be open. I'm going to be honest. And if it's bad news, I'm going to deliver bad news. And if it's good news, I'm going to deliver good news. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. So over the course of 52 weeks, I sent out over 100 memos telling franchisees. And for the first 30 days, it was pretty much every day because it was so fluid. So when Lance and I got together in the conference room back in March 2020, he reminded me of those memos, and we decided to send out COVID memos.
Yeah.
And we sent out, during COVID, we sent out over 100 memos, and it was probably the first 60 days, every
Yeah.
day. And, we tried to be very open and honest, and we had conversations with every one of our suppliers. What's going on in your business? What can we do to help you? We need product. It wasn't altruistic on our part. We had to have product to sell. And so I think that candid back and forth dialogue without BS, without fluffiness.
Yeah.
You asked about culture, and that's really, I think, defines our culture. As I've said so many times over now going into my 25th year at Penn Station to franchisees, is you may love our answer or you may despise our answer, but it's going to be honest feedback. Yeah. And, and I think that's what people want. They just want to know where they stand and what's going on, and they want leaders to shoot straight with them. So I described the personality of type A, but the culture is very open and honest, and bring us your feedback, bring us your comments, but understand us first.
Yeah.
That's how I try to approach the team. That's how I try to approach franchisees, suppliers, prospective franchisees. And I think, I blame my parents for that. Just treat people the way you want to be treated. And
totally.
Feedback.
It's
not hard. It's difficult, but
who knew
right.
that? Be honest was
but it's not hard. Just be honest.
It's interesting. You were just talking there about COVID, and you're such a numbers guy, and I'm curious. One of the things I definitely heard from a lot of kind of similar franchises is the business has kind of totally changed since COVID. We're at the backside of it.
Absolutely.
And I've had some people. Sorry, forgive me. I've had some people say to me that before COVID, 30% of their business was digital and 70% was restaurants in four walls. And there's been now it's 30% in walls and 70% digital, for example. That curbside, that online has become a huge part of their business in a way that it hasn't, that this enormous meteoric sort of change has happened within the space. What if for your, at 300 plus locations, 324 locations, there must have been some sort of huge sort of people change to the organization. Leaders coming and going, general managers, opening, closings, in developing new solutions to deliver food to people. It must have been a seismic change. And what were the sort of seismic changes that
my gosh, you're right. It was profound. It was adapt or die. And I feel badly for the mom and pops who couldn't quite do that, because it's the sit down restaurants where you'd like to go. It's an experience, right?
Yeah.
And when our founder created Penn Station, 38 years ago, he certainly didn't say, what, I'm going to design a brand that addresses a international pandemic.
Yeah.
but what we did, what we were doing, we were efficient at what we did. And so we had to change. We went on, I don't remember the exact date. I'll say March 12th, where maybe it's March 14th or 15th of 2020, where about 62% of our business was off premise, to the next day where it was 100%.
Yeah.
And we did not have third party at the time. We had been talking to the companies, but we felt like it was too cost prohibitive to do. Yeah. So we put a big focus on third party delivery. We put a big focus on carry out. We put a big focus on call in orders. And it changed dramatically what we were doing. And fortunately for the brand, COVID allowed our strengths to shine, and those strengths allowed us to fix some of the weaknesses that we had that didn't cripple our business like it did on some other brands.
Operational process reset.
Operational process. We were always, if you came into our restaurant, you were going to get your food in about 6 or 7 minutes. The difference now is when you were getting it to go. So it forced us to change our packaging. It forced us to talk about how to reheat the food. It really forced us to implement third-party delivery when we didn't love it because we thought it was so expensive.
Yeah.
So, it really made us much, much more efficient. And I remember, I spoke earlier about creating win-win situations. And I remember talking to all of our suppliers and just saying, hey, We want to help you, you help us, and we'll be there. I'll sign long-term contracts with you. I have to keep product flowing to my franchisees so they have something to sell. So, and it's dramatically changed today. I mean, I said prior to March of 2020, we didn't do third-party delivery. Now it's almost 20% of our sales.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Our web ordering was 7%, and it's doubled.
Yeah.
And dine-in continues to play a smaller role, within what we do. What COVID did is it caused customers to get the product the way they wanted to get the product and not the way the brand wants to serve them.
Yeah.
I would love for everybody to come in our restaurant, get that hot cheesesteak and fresh cut fry in front of them and touch it, and it'd be just so hot they can't yet eat it. People don't want to do that anymore, right? And COVID changed habits for the consumer, and it forced brands to do that. And I spent a lot of time looking at brands, their success and what they were doing, and brands that were failing. And it's like, you know what? It doesn't matter what we want. It's what the customer wants.
Which, business school 101,
That wasn't an epiphany for us. Yeah. We had to modify.
I mean, it's certainly interesting because, it's such a culture shift as much as a process shift. Like, you talk about how you want to serve the food and how you want customers to experience your product, but they want to experience it their own way.
Right.
And so you must have had so many learnings in terms of how do we replicate as close to possible the in-restaurant food experience to what somebody's getting from an Uber Eats driver in half an hour. Yeah. In 30 minutes, how does that food arrive as piping hot or as not stale or soggy or whichever? Right. There probably has been so much there to kind of figure out almost because you jumped head first into it.
I study the trends in the industry and what consumers are saying. I mean, there's a lot of surveys out there, and I'm really kind of blown away when you look, and QSR does this a lot, Nation's Restaurant News, and customers care more about quality and convenience than they often do the quality. The convenience of the product more than the quality of the product. I mean, quality and price are often third or fourth on the list. It's I want it and I want it now. And that's more important to me, even if the quality of the product has declined.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's kind of amazing.
I don't know. I guess I'm old school. I would rather have a great product and be a little inconvenienced as opposed to not being convenienced with a lesser quality product. But that's the trend. And we have to adapt to that. I would love, again, everyone to eat our food in-house, and it's never, ever going to happen.
And has there been in terms of the building experience within the four walls, has the experience for guests changed in light of the sort of post-pandemic sort of culture shift?
No, what has changed is we need to be efficient when it's a carryout order. It can't be a second-class order. It has to be as important as if you're dining in. You have to treat the third-party driver like your customer. Yeah. Because the last thing a third-party driver wants to do is come into the restaurant and wait 6 or 7 minutes for that food to be ready, because it's their money. Time's money to a third-party driver. And so we hired a gentleman in April of 22, and his title is Director of Franchise Services. But what that really means is that he needs to understand technology, and he needs to understand where guests want to order and how they want to order. And then his job is to be the most efficient within each of those categories as possible. Because some people only want to do third party. Some people only want to come into the restaurant.
Yeah.
So we have to be very efficient at each of those and not treat any of them as second class, because I think if you do, you're going to wind up losing that order to your competition.
Totally.
Never been more fierce.
I had somebody on and they made such a sage point, and it's obviously another basic point. She's SVP of operations at Craveworthy Brands. And she was saying to me that you don't really remember your good experience in a restaurant because you expect to have a good experience. When you go in, you're like, that's what I expected. So it's more often than not, you have a good one. But that one bad one, no matter where or how it's delivered to you, you will remember that. And so it's like Uber Eats and DoorDash and these guys are kind of blameless for better or worse, because you're not going to blame the driver, because I think most people have sympathy for the people delivering the food, but they'll blame the restaurant for how the food is packaged or how it came to them, or when you sit in the restaurant and you have bad experience and you remember that. and it's like, don't order from that place again, or you can like block it on Uber Eats, or you try a different Chinese restaurant, you try a different kind of like order, and I'm always like so curious, the pressure that the businesses must be under, and you must be under, because it's like you gotta bring your A game like all the time. You know what I mean? Like, it's like like in my job, like I hope I bring my A game every time, but like if I have a bad day, it's not like the be all and end all for the quote unquote the reputation of the business. You know what I mean? It's kind of like almost in a sort of quasi anonymous state whereas if you're a restaurant and the food goes, it's like, you see that on TikTok now, and it elevates all these things, and social, like bad food experiences go viral. And It's like, the pros and cons of social, like somebody has a great experience. Like there are new brands, like I said to you, like before the call, like we had Dave's Hot Chicken on, and they were the second guest we ever had on the podcast, and they hit 115 locations, and they've got international now. And they thrived in a pre-TikTok kind of, like, they were kind of one of the first kind of mega food brands to be born out of the hype that came around like the product on social media. But the inverse obviously is like the bad experience. So you get the good and the bad with that, which I find just so, the pressure must be unbelievable,
Yeah, it's really kind of that land of lost opportunity. And the thing that I think our best franchisees, I mean, everything's a bell-shaped curve, and they treat every guest like they are the only guest, because we're bringing in our average ticket's about $13. And so, to accumulate $1 million in sales, you are bringing that in $13 increments. Yeah. And so, I mean, just do the math, and you have to be very cognizant, and you have to be in the moment for everyone. And it goes back to what we said a couple of minutes ago. Everyone is the person who places the web order, the third-party delivery driver, the person who calls in. I'm copied still. I mean, we have an email program that's pretty robust, and since we started it, I've been copied on every customer complaint. I mean, from day one, and I look at them for trends. But what I find fascinating is, you were talking about third party, and I think the guest today is more forgiving on third party orders if the order's correct. They know that. They know that it's not going to be as great a quality, but I think consumers now are willing to accept, I'm the one who placed that order, and it's not going to be as hot, or it's not going to be as fresh. What they won't forgive is if the order's wrong.
Yeah, that's fair. I get like that.
Yes,
There's also the hangry factor, I think, kind of really stems into that. I think if I ever order food, I'm like, it's at the nth degree. It's like, I'm at like, okay, I'm not cooking, I got to eat. And
right.
If it's wrong, and I feel bad for all the service people in Uber Eats are dealing with the people.
I've had friends, and friends say to me, "I bet you're very critical when you go into restaurants," and I'm not the least bit critical. I mean, I understand what they're going through, and I'm empathetic with it, and I just want them to take care of me with good food. I'm
absolutely
very, very forgiving.
Well, I guess the only last thing I want to ask you, which is like the topic du jour of restaurants, hospitality, technology, is AI. And I've had people on the podcast that have talked about different kind of technological implementations, like drive-through solely through AI. No humans running drive-through anymore, and it's like 99% accurate. So, it's like we're kind of coming into that, or like how it works in sort of the restaurant and sort of operations. And I'm curious if you guys kind of dipped your toe into that, and are you seeing any success or initial success? Or
we're not. We've explored it. I mentioned Tyler, and that's certainly one of his roles, is to explore AI. We spend a lot of money on it. We spend a lot of time on exploring it, and basically we're ready for a test pilot. But Alex, we're second to market. We're not first.
Yeah.
And I've said several times today that we're selling return on investment, and our franchisees, if we introduce something to the brand, and we'll just specifically, since we're talking about AI, our franchisees, it has to grow their sales, it has to be economical, and they have to ultimately make money on it. And I was at a conference last quarter, and I was talking with someone in the technology field, and I said, and I'd met him 4 or 5 years ago, and I said, man, your business must have changed a lot the last 5 years. And they said, our business model isn't even the same as it was 5 years ago. We're not even selling the same product because technology has changed so much. And that told me a couple of things that it really reinforced something I already knew, which is we have to be careful if we're selling franchisees on this technology because it will come and go. Some are fads, some are trends, and some are going to be here forever. And we don't want to be first to market. I think AI is here. I mean, Siri, when you buy Delta airline tickets or you have a problem, you're talking to a computer, right? All that's AI generated. So I think it's here to stay, but we're going to be second to market and not first. We are keeping a very, very close eye on it. And I ultimately suspect if you placed a call-in order at Penn Station down the road, it's probably going to be AI and not a person answering the phone, because the crew's got enough to do without answering the phone. Totally. And we still want to generate the sale. So I see it a lot more, and I think it's going to continue to grow for my little perch.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Craig. This has been amazing, and you've been a wonderful guest. I appreciate it.
Alex, I appreciate it. I'm always humbled and honored. So thank you very much.